Hello there. Welcome to this final episode of the Strife and Grimbone walkthrough. This is a creation of a Foundry VTT module for Pathfinder 2nd edition. In this final episode we had already defeated the main end boss, the Master, and now we're going to talk about a bit of an epilogue and perhaps have a general discussion about other things. So we have brought the Master to 0 hit points today. What happens? So we have a section here. The Master defeated. At last, the Master is dealt a final blow, somewhere here probably, and winces in agony. He becomes insubstantial, turning towards his sarcophagus, his sanctuary for long millennia, but his ghostly face twists in defeat as he realizes you have already compromised his sanctuary. With a long moan, his wispy form is drawn to the sarcophagus like smoke through a chimney. And then if the PCs open the lid, which is not trapped or anything, looking warily inside, we see the Master slowly reforming as a corpse-like figure lying within his tube, unconscious and vulnerable. The DC still need to finish off the Master. If they never researched vampires beforehand, or did not ask the sage or the soothsayer in Grimbone, a DC 19 recall knowledge religion check is required. Secret in case they get particularly pale and say, oh yeah, vampires are ultimately destroyed by turning the sarcophagus upside down or something like that. Check. It is required to recall the basics of killing a vampire. As described under weaknesses, they need to stake the vampire through the heart and cut off his head, or they could take his unconscious body up to the surface to bright sunlight. However, if there is no wooden stake through his heart, at some point on the journey up to the light, the Master, even if turned to ash by burning, may transform to mist again and head back to his coffin, but perhaps they can just repeat the same process. Note there is no sunlight in the miasmal swamp, but there is a 50% chance of sunlight in Grimbone on any given daylight hour. The nearest available wood might be the shafts or a few tools strewn about the mines. Master destroyed. Read the following and the Master is finally destroyed. Oops, that's not right. No heading at all. No. So here by mistake I clicked a heading headings. Ah, see, headings. Oh, heading 1 tick. Well, do that again. Control Z is our friend. Last year, finally and irrevocably, I think. Laid this ancient vampire to rest, its body burns from within in cold and holy flames and rapidly collapses to ash. The ash turns to dust, soon even the dust is no more, scattered forever on a magical wind, on a profane wind. You have achieved what millennia of time, cataclysms and beast-folk armies could not, the final eradication of the curse of the Thessalonians upon this land. Grimbone is saved. And what the players are all here for, the Master's treasures. The Master's greatest treasure is his dropped foreshard, the traditional weapon of his noble Thessalonian family. This polearm is not innately evil and is a cunning +1 striking foreshard, but it was on him. And the piece used to be able to, if you put lootable corpses on, the piece used to be able to loot the corpse. Scattered among the open chests and urns are blah blah blah, right? And let's put these items in a chest. Or in a pile. I think like a pile. So, an actor, a loot actor, and a loot actor. Modules. I'm going to look up P, pile of treasure. Treasure pile. Very generic, but it's simply indicating that because I haven't done it before, so I'll choose a different frame. Gold pieces. Any other? No, it's only gold. Then we have the jasper. There. And we'll edit that to increase the value to 50. We have a miniature image of Masala, which I've done already, items. Alabaster statuette. And that is correct value. A true value. it says 50 sold pieces, 5 gold pieces. Well, give and take, okay. Right, a lump of amber. We've got a 15 gold piece one here. A green spinel. Do a green one. I don't think we have a pair of those, so we can use that one. And the green ones are worth 30 gold pieces, not 25 silver. Spinel green and opal. I never forget the I'm not sure if it was just a custom thing or part of Ravenloft, where Strada and Zarvich in this game we played was obsessed about the black opal, and he would periodically charm one of the PCs to say to the other PCs, do you have the black opal? So we spent most of the adventure asking each other if we had the black opal. I mean, no idea what that meant, and we never even had any idea even when we finished the game. Opal. The base is 50, but this one is much more. 200. So big opal. Maybe it's the black opal. And that's it. I think sometimes when I do these I have no frame, don't I? I think I'm going to do that. It's just a thing. Keep it quite big. So that's that. Actually, no, a bit small. So they can see the actual picture. The sarcophagus is bare apart from a golden key dropped carelessly inside it at the foot end. And I took this earlier. Gold sarcophagus key, so it doesn't do anything, it's just a treasure item. Brought within 5 feet of the central platform in the antechamber, the key starts to vibrate like a tuning fork and emits a low hum. If touched to the platform in its activated state, the whole platform starts to hum, and the central 10-foot square section slowly levitates upwards as a 6-inch thick stone disc. It rises through the ceiling shaft up through K55, which is the lower temple, with the statues there, and then finally coming to rest at the upper temple, the one with the not the steps, that's the one with the pillars, and the upper temple is the one with the statues. As the platform approaches the floor of K26, the upper temple, the central section slides aside so the platform neatly takes its place. Touching the key before the platform reaches the top arrests its ascent, and touching it again makes it descend slowly and then again to stop, repeating the pattern. This route to the underground crypt was only used by the master in life and by his lackeys in ancient times. When he finally awoke as a vampire, he simply rose up through the shaft in mist form and passed through cracks under the sliding section of floor in K26, and then through cracks between the broken masonry of the block staircases up to the swamp. He might on a whim have sometimes taken a detour to terrorize Nemo and frighten a few beast folk, but never engaged in a corporeal form, finding amusement in keeping Nemo and Saturn in a state of paranoia. So we'll add a macro. To raise and lower the platform. And where's that macro? Mausoleum platform. So we'll check how that works. We'll have a character actually moving from the bottom of that. We'll just have that. As long as we've got our mouse there, it's going to work. See, the sound has been activated. We'll click the macro. We've seen an activated book, we'll just have it like that so we can see better. So this texture will change. So click it now. You can imagine it coming up, revealing the pattern of the floor underneath. Everything else screwing inside. And click it again. Bring it back. And after 10 seconds, you can see the texture has changed. The players will just see the texture completely change. So that's that done. And now we conclude the adventure. Sunken City, we had, we need to do some labels, don't we? Let's do this quickly. Right, where do we copy from? Copy from lines. So we've got to K54. No, copy 0 objects. Object, note object, so we have to set the journal notes to be able to copy them. And back to lower temple. Temple of Ascension and Descension. E37 areas, not quite a mega dungeon, but quite a big one. Maybe I should have had different levels and smaller numbers, but I quite like the idea of having it as a K, because that was our encounter key when we were in the X map, and we kept that K going throughout this whole area. Manual sorting is correct. So let's come after there. Now we should better change the name, wouldn't we? Pick it up and call it. And we'll just give it the same name. But we won't just take the title again. And text in. This sound. When Nemo's defeated, any remaining beast folk scatter and go back to their respective tribes in the swamp, chastened by their experience with outsider humanoids and fearful of facing their life again. They will not leave the swamp. The town will fade the PCs and briefly celebrate the return of any captured townsfolk from the mines. More important to many will be the discovery of the real mines that will rejuvenate the town's export business. And there in our XP award, we go to our faithful first, not the Ashford, Grimbone. First come in there. Yeah. Here's our editor. If the master has not been faced and defeated, the PC to be reminded of a number of loose ends, namely the continued ghoul strike and vampire spawn attacks, not to mention their actual meeting with the master in the graveyard. They may wish to go back and explore the chambers of mind more thoroughly in the search for the Master's lair. If not, the PCs might leave Grimbone satisfied and pleased with themselves, or do so fearful of undead foes. If this happens, after a week, news reaches Pendaka that disaster has struck Grimbone again. Its population is decimated, most transformed into an undead army led by the Master and chosen minions. This army will march from Pendaka, and from there multiply and expand across the region if unchecked, in a manner to rival the Whispering Tyrant himself. In fact, it might be the founding of a new undead Thessalonian realm, with the Master risen as the Rulord of Sloth. PCs defeat the Master, the folk of Grimbone are largely underwhelmed, but the PCs are still thanked by the Triumvirate, who feel that Harper may now at last rest in peace. The two remaining members set about electing a replacement. As the days go by, there is a noticeable lifting of the mood in Grimbone. Folk are less greedy and more thrifty and hard-working. They share out the profits from the newly opened mines and set out to improve the town's defences and pacify the surrounding forests. The Silkweed has finally been lifted from the ashwood. And then I'll do a final one, further adventures. PCs might wish to retire. Perhaps they were traumatized by the encounter with the master, or have lost the taste for adventure and wish to settle down. They might take on the role of the sage, or act as understudy. Alternatively, the triumvirate may request that a PC complete number if the PC is laid a Grimbone ghost to the breast. I'd want a PC, especially a ranger or fighter, to act to lead the town's garrison as if to keep the black arrows Finally, the PC might involve themselves in the mercantile aspects of the silver trade. 2. The PCs might search for other nests of Lasala worship in the area, including those hiding in Pendaka. Remember, we've had a hidden cult of Lasala in Pendaka that the PCs might explore. They might then travel further afield pursuing this quest. The PCs might focus more on the past than the present, unearthing other ancient relics of the Thessalonian age and the Ashford beyond. The PCs might be curious about the beast folk and seek them out in the swamp, or take revenge on them. To exploit them, to play one tribe off against the another, or they might try to introduce them gently back into the world. And finally, the PCs may well focus on Master Tigris. He's the author of the letter to Nemo, and the destination of the silver and meteoric iron. This line of investigation will lead them to the next adventure in the series, Thieves of Keramaga. And that's it. That's the creation of an adventure. It doesn't take any time at all, really, does it? And that's even when I've been doing the maps separately sometimes, and certainly creating them in Dungeon Alchemist, and when I'd already written the adventure. One thing I want to mention as a kind of my own creation, Foundry VTT epilogue as opposed to the adventure epilogue, is use of rule elements, which I have not discussed already. So what I'm referring to in particular is use of items. Items like a magic sword, we can easily give them the stats by the details and set the materials, the potency, striking runes if we have them, and property runes, all fairly straightforward. But what happens if we have a custom item that we want to create? And I'll show you how we can do that, aside from just copying something that's in a compendium. So we'll take as an example the healing amulet. If you recall, this was found in the bottom of the pit, of the famous pit in the pendulum, And it says the amulet provides the healing hands, feet, and a +1 item bonus to the DC for undead to save against the vitality effects of heal spells. So that's quite a specific bonus. Now we might just remember that by shift clicking and a saving throw for the undead, and then putting a -1 penalty on it, or maybe increasing the DC by 1 on that saving throw check. Or we could do it automatically, and this is how we would do the latter. So for the healing hands, the best thing would just be to drag that onto the character sheet, and they would automatically get the healing hands feat, and the engine will handle that. All the D8s for healing will become D10s for whoever's where it was. And then the GM or the player must remember, if they're not got the item equipped, they delete that feat from their character sheet. But this is something that would be nice to automate, the +1 item bonus. And this is how we do it on the details, because other than that, in the rules. And the Pathfinder 2nd edition people have helpfully provided a kind of script way of doing this rather than coding it outright. And this is what I've done, and we'll talk about it again. So we go to label healing amulet, but it defaults to the name of the object there. And we have a selector, which is the, I should explain, flat modifier is one of many things that you can have, but I'm only going to be talking about flat modifiers. So there are choices there. And the thing that we're going to flatly modify is spell DC. The primitive is 1, that's how much we modify it by. We have a choice of the kind of bonus, including item. And predicate is something more specific, so this is specific to healing. So how on earth did we work all that out? But this is how we would do it if we had a new item. So we select an actor, obviously Kyra, who could use healing, and we select a stooge, and I think a suitable stooge, subjects we shall call them, the zombie shambler that they were met in the graveyard outside of Grimbone. So Kyra is going to target the zombie shambler and cast a healing spell. Which is obviously not for people, need to give some more. Someone has been testing this out. Back to 4 heal spells, so she'll cast that. We have these different options, so we'll choose the heal versus undead option. And whoa, Kyra, you cheat. She already has it. But take that away. Go away. Do the same thing again. We're taking it away. She's going to cast a spell again. Heal versus undead. Oh, something's happened. DC's gone down to 17. Well, it's a bit of a clue that something worked, isn't it? So, that suggests that it works. But how did we get to all this? So she'll cast the spell. But before we do that, we want to look at what she's cast. We right click and do inspect roll. And the selectors that are relevant to that action are listed here. The roll options are there, but I think that will perhaps become more specific when we want the zombie shambler actually to make its saving throw, which we'll do after we click that one. So, but when she's casting the spell, these are the selectors that could be involved, and so these are options for the selector field. And we don't press all, but it could be base spell casting DC, divine spell DC, spell attack DC, spell DC. Well, it will just return it as an item. Let's just use the default spell DC. So that's how we chose our selector. So this is the parameter that we're going to apply the bonus to, the spell DC. So if we were doing a skill check, we would do the skill check in the tab, right click it, inspect it, and then we would see how that would work. It might be something like athletics. So that would be the thing that we're putting the bonus on. Say there was an item that gave an athletics bonus to certain athletics tasks. The primitive is 1. Now we have to how do we get to that? So we'll actually do the saving throw. Which always we're going to critically fail against Kyra, obviously. And then we'll right click this, inspect the roll. So saving throw, yeah, but it was the spell DC that we needed to change. That was what Kyra did. This is what the zombie is doing, making a saving throw. So when we come to the predicate, these are the roll options. So these are kind of the parameters, the sort of traits of the roll that the zombie made. And we've got healing there, and that's kind of nice. And these are all the traits, so this is like the kind of armor you might have, and his attributes, all the attributes of the zombie who made the roll. But healing looks pretty appropriate, doesn't it? And the format we do there is an array, so the healing goes in inverted commas as a string, and then put in square brackets for an array, and that's what we do there. We already saw that it worked. We've got the healing amulet item there. She will well, we see it's DC 17. And then she will equip the item, or we'll give her another one. Healing amulet's back in there. So it should be DC 17, because she hasn't invested it. Let's see if that's the case. Another casting of. What's the healing? Another casting of healing. This heal versus undead. DC 17. She hadn't equipped it. Now she will equip it. And list it. Right. So it doesn't show up on there as a like a condition, but nevertheless we have it because we will now do it again. Here versus undead, DC now 80, and we see now base DC 10, wisdom plus 4, trait plus 3, healing amulet plus 1 is really nicely specified in there. Now that predicate is just for healing, isn't it? We don't want it to be for all spell DCs. So what if we do something else that requires a DC, a day's spell? And we see there that the DC 17, even though the healing amulet is equipped, it knew that it was only going to apply to healing, not to all the spell DCs of the person who has the amulet. So that's the final thing I wanted to explain there with ruled elements. So in summary, we created the first chapter of an adventure path, and I plan to do the remainder of those right up to level 20, like a Pathfinder 2nd edition proper adventure path. Obviously this is a little bit more than the typical 1 to 4 level. It probably took the PCs up to level 5 or level 6, probably level 6. The intention would be that the next adventure would start from level 6. Pathfinder 2nd edition has the flexibility of changing on monsters to elite or weak if you feel that they're too powerful. We had perhaps more of an open-ended adventure than typical. We started with exploration after a very initial combat, just to get the PCs to get a little bit of experience, or the players to get a little bit of experience with that initial encounter with the electric eel. And then there was the ambush there, but a number of these are rather optional, so the PCs could be at quite different levels depending on how many of these they've done. And so we have the benefit of not having an official adventure path, or perhaps having a little bit more content and giving the GM and the players a little bit more open-ended sandbox flexibility. I don't think that every encounter needs to be defeated to get the PCs up to the level that you need on an encounter and for the next adventure path. So we had this open-ended arrangement here, which is hardly a sandbox, but slightly in that direction. And we had a town encounter, a town element, and then we had the final dungeon, and with a smaller dungeon over there in the cultist crypts. So that was my idea behind creating the adventure. And in terms of the mechanics that we discussed, I think that I've hopefully shown you how helpful Dungeon Alchemist could be in allowing us to create our maps. And even from the very first encounter, Darker Docs, I've shown you how if you want animations, which are much nicer than static maps, you don't have to create huge megabyte, gigabyte-sized files in the Dungeon Alchemist. You can create them as tiles. So you have a background from Dungeon Alchemist, the whole map, and then you can just make a much smaller Dungeon Alchemist map, export that as a MP4 or WebM file. So it's animated and it's not too large, and we just place that as a tile overlying the background. You've seen that I like to do walls as a separate layer, which is generally done in the adaptation of the official adventure paths, to give that nice impression of the PCs being against a wall and the wall kind of overlapping with the token, or going under doorways, that sort of thing. Other mechanical elements were creation of macros. And we had quite a few macros. If we take the last one there, we had a macro for the platform going up and down, and generally those involve making tiles or tokens visible or invisible. We had delays, so the macro can have different things happening in the sequence, switching on lights and off lights, switching on and off sounds, and we had quite a bit of a variety of those. And then finally we had a lot of custom creatures, loot items, hazards, and we looked at how we would either adapt existing ones or create new ones from scratch. I think I'm going to do a kind of epilogue of this, because version 13 is just about to come out, and that's going to include some nice visual effects like doors which animatedly open. I hope that the doors are going to be in the background layer, so that when I have my walls layer, which is usually 10 feet high in the foreground, the door frame will still overlie the door, so we get the appearance, my own original appearance of the door. I suspect that we're going to have a lot more variety in Dungeon Alchemist for door frame appearances than in Foundry VTT, and then we would presumably, we can set double doors or single doors. We would just see the door like a stone or wood or metal door, and like that as it opens, rather than overlying the whole background layer. But we'll see in only a few days' time. Also, the new version will have region control of difficult terrain. and indeed we've had other movement types like swimming types. So it looks like I'm going to be going through all these maps and marking out regions of difficult terrain, perhaps greater difficult terrain, which would be nice for the players of GM experience. So I'd like to thank you all, those who listened and watched this extensive walkthrough, and maybe I'll be releasing this adventure sometime, either free or for a nominal charge on the Foundry system for people to GM and to play. And thanks very much, and